So I'm looking at some of the prospects for the eligible for the 2026 NFL Draft. Some of the top guys right now. This is interesting. So if you guys aren't familiar with this NFL mock draft database, is the website they compile rankings based on all these mock drafts. So it's very. I'm actually interested in the consensus. Now the consensus, you got to take the consensus with a grain of salt because sometimes the consensus is not very good. The consensus is the consensus for a reason, but I think the consensus has validity to it just because if most people think a certain way on something, a lot of is it all doesn't mean it's always true. Obviously, you do hear of the term group think for a reason. It can be wrong, but if most people feel like, for example, Arch Manning's the second ranked player. Most people feel Arch Manning could be a top quarterback class in this class. So that means if most people think he can be a top quarterback in this class next year, then odds are there's a chance he likely will be. Now Arch Manning, kind of an exception. This is a guy that's been that's a guy that's been highly touted for a long time. But other examples: Caleb Downs, former 5-star, Bama, Alabama, transferred to Ohio State. So yes, here's some of the guys: Drew Aller, quarterback from Penn State; Arch Manning, quarterback from Texas; Garrett Nussmeier, quarterback from LSU. Now Garrett Nussmeier could be interesting. We could be that narrative next year could be the next great quarterback from LSU. I mean, you had Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels to now Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier waiting his turn after Jaden Daniels leaves. Then Garrett Nussmeier does a pretty good job last year. Now he has a chance in, what is this, year 5, year 6 for Garrett Nussmeier. Now he has a chance to really take off and be one of those stories where waited his turn, got his opportunity, had a decent season, and then maybe has a year where it takes off. It could be very similar to Joe Burrow's situation where waits his turn, gets his chance, does pretty good. If he would have came out in Joe Burrow, if he would have entered the draft after the 2018 season, the 2019 draft, probably like people talk about a third round, and then he chooses to come back and becomes the number 1 overall pick. Could be a similar scenario for Garrett Nussmeier. Like if Garrett Nussmeier came out in this draft, I don't know. That would be interesting where he would rank, but probably would go somewhere, 3 to the 5th round. Maybe goes late, undrafted. I don't know. Probably at least third round or later. So Garrett Nussmeier a chance to come back and really solidify himself as one of the top players, not only top quarterbacks, but one of the top players. Caleb Downs, Isaiah World. I was watching a little bit of him. He's was at Nevada. He's going to play at Oregon this year. T.J. Parker, defensive lineman out of Clemson. Hadn't watched him. Caden Proctor, high recruit out of high school. It seems like Alabama is just continuing to pump out offensive linemen. Kendrick Falk, Auburn. Ruben Bain, I was watching a little bit of, high recruit out of high school, athletic guy, really looks the part, really big, strong, muscular build. Francis Mauigoa. I think Mauigoa was a starter for this year for Miami, if I'm not mistaken, but a talented guy. Peter Woods, too, from Clemson. Peter Woods is the guy I'm going to watch closely. To me, Peter Woods, with the talent he has, and I watched his tape in high school, I haven't really watched a ton of him at Clemson. He, to me, has a guy that could have a really breakout, dominant season. We're kind of talking him, and he's like in the discussion like with Mason Graham this year as kind of the blue chip interior defensive line prospect. So that's the type of player, that's the type of talent Peter Woods has. We'll just see if he has that dominant season that he could really hang his hat off. Nico, I have trouble pronouncing his last name. The quarterback that was at former 5-star that was at Tennessee, now is at UCLA. Lenoris Sellers, too, a guy that's getting a lot of hype. I haven't watched him a whole lot. Jermod McCoy. Cade Klubnik, now we're here at number 15. Klubnik seems like he's been in college for a long time now. Klubnik, a lot of hype around him, just hasn't really developed into that. Necessarily a particularly great quarterback, even though, he's had some flashes and he's been pretty solid overall. Anthony Hill Jr., super athletic linebacker. Even if Anthony Hill is one of those guys I can see, kind of reminds me of, was it DeMarvin Overshown from a couple years ago? Actually was ironically from Texas too. Super fast, athletic linebacker. Like Hill, he might not have the skill set to be like a great all-around linebacker, but I could see next year him being a guy that teams really follow closely just because of what type of an athlete, just because the burst he has when he blitzes and just the burst when he shoots gaps. And I guess just the burst when he's doing everything, the burst when he's closing in on ball carriers, that just really stands out. The overall speed and just burst and athleticism that Anthony Hill Jr. has. Former 5-star number 1 linebacker, too, out of high school. Aaron Anderson, too, was at Alabama, transferred to LSU. Carson Beck, too. Carson Beck, interesting. If he would have came out, there was time. This time last year, people were considering Carson Beck a potential top 3 pick, maybe number 1 quarterback for the potentially. People were hypothesizing that last year, and then he chose to come back. Or he not only is choosing to come back to college football, he's going to play at Miami this year. Evan Stewart, too. I'm going to watch Evan Stewart closely this year. I think he could be a riser. I think he's down at number 26 in the consensus board. I think Evan Stewart could really rise. I think he's shown enough in college that with another really strong season and takes even more steps of improvement, I think Evan Stewart, a guy that can really rise. Caleb Banks is another. Caleb Banks here, defensive lineman for Florida. I really liked him a lot coming out of high school. He's a really good. He was a really good football player, fun to watch. I think he's got a skill set too that could really keep improving and really elevate his stock here, sitting at number 27. Mateo Uiagalelei, DJ Uiagalelei's brother, edge rusher from Oregon, sits at 29. It'd be interesting what guys kind of rise and falls. Zachariah Branch. Antonio Williams I like here, number 36. Nick Singleton, the running back from Penn State, I like. Avion Terrell, A.J. Terrell's brother, down at 39. Sonny Styles down at 43. Damani Jackson, too, from Alabama. Keon Sabb. I thought Keon Sabb might declare for this year's draft. Safety from Bama, sits at 58. 62, Deontay Lawson. 65, the edge rusher from Oklahoma, Edabaro. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Igbonos in the corner from Ohio State at 69. There's some interesting guys. Harold Perkins at 82. Yeah, that's way too low. Harold Perkins, I think, could be a riser, too. You know, there's talks Harold Perkins was going to declare for this draft. Harold Perkins, I could see going high, even if he doesn't have a great year next year, was injured this past year. Even if he doesn't have a great year next year, I could see him going maybe higher than people think just because the dude is just kind of like Anthony Hill. Highly rated linebacker coming out of high school. I think he was the top rated linebacker in the 22 class, I want to say. 2022, yeah. So him and Anthony Hill both were the top linebackers, respectively, coming out of high school. Harold Perkins was just in the class before. But yeah, I could see Harold Perkins going earlier than people think just because of the traits he has. Damani Jackson, too. He was a high 5-star recruit out of high school. Never has really developed into a shutdown corner. It's kind of one of those things that's happening with the NFL right now. It's people assume guy from good school, good production, it's going to translate. That's kind of Damani Jackson. Played at a big-time high school. I think he played at Mater Dei out in California, so people are like, oh, good player, big-time high school, must be a 5-star, so it was kind of... And he had a few really good traits. I think that's how guys get overrated in high school. They have a few really good traits, but look at some of the other rest of their traits are like kind of, solid to kind of average to a little above average. That was Damani Jackson. I mean, I'll look it up. What's this? Damani Jackson's pretty big and he's got the size and, there's some things to like about him, but the overall skill set, there's some things that were lacking in this game, at least when I watched him in high school. Like, to me, I guess for comparison, he was in a class with Travis Hunter and Will Johnson. You saw Travis Hunter go second overall. Will Johnson slipped second round because without the injury, he might have went top 5, might have went top 10. But to compare him, he was in the same he was up there ranked actually ahead of Will Johnson, just behind Travis Hunter. So it's a guy who was ranked highly among, some good players in high school, but it hasn't really he hasn't really manifested into a great player. Yeah, some of these guys I have to watch just a little bit more on. Lenore Sellers. But yeah, Peter Woods really intrigues me. I think Peter Woods. Isaiah World looks pretty good. I'm watching his tape right now. But yeah, Drew Aller, Arch Manning. It's going to be interesting. The conversations about Arch Manning. That's going to be, I think people think that they really went on and on about Shedeur Sanders this year. I think those conversations could be even more so. I think there could be more talk. I think there could be even more discussions and I think there could be a lot more conversation about Arch Manning. So, yeah, Nussmeier, we'll see if he really takes off this year. Carnell Tate, the Ohio State receiver, looks pretty good. Yeah, Carson Beck. We'll see if Carson Beck can kind of get his NFL. See if we can kind of get his NFL draft stock back on track. Yeah, right here it shows the peak. He was the number 2. It's interesting to see where these guys peak. Malik Muhammad, too, corner out of Texas. He sits at 25 in the consensus board. But yeah, some guys hanging around in college football: Antonio Williams, Nick Singleton. These are the guys that could have declared for this year's draft, especially Nick Singleton. I'm not sure where he would have ranked relative to some of the other running backs in this class, but yeah, Nick Singleton, a good player, former 5-star running back out of high school, and he's got a chance to be the best running back, prospect next year in 2026. But yeah, I like Ruben Bain. He's a specimen as far as the way he's built. Keon Sabb, Raylan Wilson. Yeah, it's always fun to kind of look and see some of the guys that were, like if we fast forward to the draft next year, like for example, is Nussmeier, he's number 3 right now. Is Nussmeier going to be in this position? Is he still going to be viewed as, 3 overall player, 3rd quarterback next year? Or Caleb Downs, is he going to be, Caleb Downs sits as the consensus number 1 safety. Is he still, this time next year, is he still going to be considered the top consensus safety? So very interesting stuff.